Welcome to Movement Monday here on Heart of a Volunteer Veterans Podcast with your host, Daniel Hurd. Dan has been cycling one paddle at a time through 44 of the lower 48 states, nearly 18,000 miles and thousands of engagements to break the stigma of suicide. Join Dan as he engages in conversations with guests that are on their own movement to influence positive change and bring hope. Again, welcome and enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to Movement Monday. I'm your host, Dan. Back in episode 2, I talked about a movement that I value very dearly. And if you have followed my journey at any point through Ride with Dan USA or the nonprofit One Pedal at a Time movement, then you've heard me talk about LivingWorks education. LivingWorks is the world-leading suicide intervention training organization. They believe, let me take that back. We believe suicide is preventable. We all can learn to play a life-saving role. It's an honor to be an ambassador, as well as having OPAP movement affiliated with them. I've been thankful to take their START and ASSIST course, but I've been looking into doing their newest program as well. I thought, what better way to share this movement that's so near and dear to me than to bring them in to share their own organization and their new program called LivingWorks Faith. Our co-host today is my first guest that I didn't meet on my journey, yet we are strongly connected to this cause. Before joining the LivingWorks team, our co-host served for 30 years as an active duty Army chaplain, working with some of the Army's most elite. He served from platoon to Army staff and all levels in between before retiring as a colonel in 2011. Please welcome today's veteran co-host, Glen Bloomstrom, to the series. He is LivingWorks Director of Faith Community Engagement. Glen works with faith communities, the U.S. Department of Defense, veteran organizations, and international militaries. I'm excited for us to get to know him and the work he is doing at LivingWorks. Let's lean forward and get moving. Glen, it's an honor to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, hey, I hope the weather up in it's Minnesota, right, that you're in?
Oh, yes.
How's the weather up there right now?
It's snowing big time, and the snow plows are going by on the street, so hopefully they won't make too much noise.
Hopefully not, but if they do, it's part of the routine. It's meant to be that way, so we'll make it work. Hey, so as in the introduction, I said, like, you're the first person that I've had on this podcast that I have not got the opportunity to meet personally on my journey. But in reality, I feel like we already kind of know each other because of like the connection of service and the passion that we both have for suicide awareness and prevention and education. So I feel like we already know each other pretty well.
The feeling is mutual, Dan. Just talking before today, it's a pleasure to get to know you and hear your story. And that's so important, isn't it? To really be able to hear people's story, their journey, and join them, in that chapter where you happen to connect.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And I'm thankful that our paths have crossed because of LivingWorks. And I'm excited to hear about you. And actually, if you're interested, I would like to start that with what led you to joining the Army as a chaplain?
Okay. Well, Dan, I grew up in the military. My dad, I guess I was made in Japan, and I was born into the military. My dad was, at that time, he was a first sergeant in the Army, and I've lived in Vietnam. I've lived in several places in the States. I lived in Vietnam as a kid, and just before the war started, and then lived in Paris, France, and then we retired to central Minnesota. So that was where our family homestead was. But I just grew up in the culture of the military. And so, when my dad retired, there were still guys going to Vietnam. And I that was all what I was about. So later, when I kind of grew in my faith and sensed a calling by God, I knew I wanted to go back into the culture of the military, specifically of the United States Army, and serve as a chaplain. And so I had that opportunity to serve for 30 years on active duty. And I wouldn't regret or want to dismiss a day of that service. It was just really fabulous.
Well, I'm glad that you did 30 years. That's an amazing accomplishment, first of all. So I'm honored to have you on here to talk about that. But, you know, something I do want to bring up that we talked about before was your dad was really persistent, I guess would be the right word to use, about you going to college before you joined. If you wanted to do the service, he was okay with that, but he really wanted you to go to college.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, my dad was a World War II draftee. He was drafted in 1943. And so he dropped out of high school because he knew he was going to go to the Army. And then he served in Europe and then came back and he got his GED. And jobs were hard to get. And then he went back into the military, you know, for the rest of his career. But he really struggled even to get an associate's degree. And so there were a couple times in college and even after I was married in seminary preparing for ministry, I said, "Hey, Dad, I think I'm going to take a year break and go on this mission opportunity." And my dad said, "No, you will not." I said, "Dad, I'm married. I can do whatever I feel God's leading." He said, "No, you will not." And then so I said, "Dad, what's up?" He said, "Son, I've told you so many times, get your education first, get that behind you, then you can do whatever you want." Because, you know, it was really hard for him to get college when he was married, and when he had a job, and when he was, really dedicated to his job in the military, in the Army. So I appreciate that for really about that emphasis now. And I think it's really important. And I shared that a lot with a lot of young soldiers when I was on active duty. You know, now's the time before you're married and have children, family. That's a great time to try to knock out some of that college.
Absolutely.
And even get ready for grad school if you want to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's for anybody out there that has kids, I'm sure they, if they aren't going to school now, if they are, you know, I'm sure they see how hard it is. But for those younger people listening that aren't married, that don't have kids yet, take this advice. Go get your education done. Don't put it off because the next thing you know, you don't have time for it. So definitely agree with that, Glenn. I appreciate you sharing that as well. How was your time, you know, in the service? You did some pretty amazing things. You were with some pretty elite groups as well.
Yeah. Again, Dan, and you'd expect a chaplain to say this, but it's all God's grace. You know what I mean? Every chapter, every circumstance of our life, if we see it through the lens of faith, I think we can clearly see how God opened doors and led and grew us through challenging things. Yeah, so I always wanted to be airborne, you know. So when I was in seminary, I got to go into basic training and hang around other chaplains. I did some work in a prison. I was in a hospital. I went through basic training, and I learned about the opportunities. And so I really wanted to be in the airborne, jump out of planes. And so that was my first assignment. And then from there, I had a chance to serve with the Special Forces unit over in Germany. And after that, I was assigned to a Ranger battalion. So, I mean, I really had some elite times as a captain. Then I served in an infantry division as a major, went to school, graduate school. Military sent me to marriage and family graduate school training, and worked at the Pentagon for a while. And then just before I retired, I went full circle, and I was a command chaplain in a special operations task force. And I had young chaplains of all different ranks working for me as they were parts of special operations task forces around the world. So it was like living a dream. And, each challenge was built confidence in God's grace to help in the midst of those challenges, including combat. You know, I was involved in combat as a fairly young chaplain. I was involved in an invasion and actually had a parachute jump into combat. And every one of those, when you strip away all the bravado, and all of that kind of stuff, really, and you consider the fact that you could die at any moment, your faith becomes very real. And it's not just a lucky charm, but when you hit the ground, when I was airborne, a lot of the times they say, okay, guys, we'll have a prayer before. But don't forget to thank God when you get out of your parachute and nothing's broken. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's a lot of like life. You're prayerful, you're hopeful, but then after a hard and difficult time, you're more grateful than ever for that grace that God gives.
Absolutely. And to connect myself to that, I found God for myself on my journey. I wasn't a big believer of faith. And for people hearing the word faith, I definitely want to emphasize this. Faith for us is a higher power, but you got to have faith in people, humanity first. You got to have faith in yourself. And I think that's where what led me to finding faith in God is I found faith in myself. I believed that I could bicycle across the country. And then I had to have faith in humanity, as much as it's hard to believe with the social media and the news that we see, especially with this recent times. It's hard to almost want to believe that there's good people left out there. And I'm testament to this, that there's a lot of good people in the world still. I like to even say like 0.1% that we see on the TV is literally the 0.1% of the world that is doing bad things. And, I think that's important to remember is you got to have faith in yourself, faith in humanity, faith in a higher power, to make things work. And looking back, I definitely noticed that faith was playing a role in my life long before I believed in it.
Wow, that's beautiful, Dan, the way you express that. And I think I encountered that a lot as a brand new chaplain, as a brand new Baptist chaplain. I really loved hearing young people's their stories, their ways of thinking, and I think listening is so very important. And that was a privilege. To be a part of their journey. And what I liked about being a chaplain is we were there to guarantee the free exercise of all faiths. Now, obviously, I'm not a rabbi or an imam, but I could make sure that my soldiers, my military personnel, if they had a particular faith need, my job was to make sure they could, exercise that faith. And even the freedom to not exercise faith was something I was also focused on as a chaplain. And I think that's very different than your regular pastor or priest in the civilian world. It was a real privilege, and it was a constitutional privilege.
Yes, that's amazing. And I'm thankful that our military and our country allows that open choice of faith. So I'm thankful that you were able to be an ambassador to make sure that we still had that. But, for the time that you were in the service, you did a lot of stuff. But when were you introduced to LivingWorks, and how did you get involved while you were in the service with that?
Well, as I mentioned, I was assigned to the Pentagon to what's called the Army staff. So you have the Air Force, the Army, the Navy staff, and there's a whole bunch of people that are working there for the big Army outside of that building. And I work for the Chief of Army Chaplains. And so I had the responsibility for working. My boss at that time was working in plans, programming, training, and policy development. And so we had contracts in suicide prevention, and with some really tremendous institutions and some people that were scholars, had written books on trying to understand people with suicide. And I managed a contract that had like 4 weeks of training. But Dan, it was a lot of PowerPoint. And it was cool. I mean, we flew out to this place in Kansas. It was called the Menninger Institute. And we had all these really smart people teaching us. But then I was introduced to LivingWorks Assist, which is called Applied Suicide Intervention Skill Training. And I went to this workshop and I said, wow, this is really different, because it wasn't just information. They kind of eased you in over 2 days where you had to practice this model of having a conversation. And when I saw that, I talked to the chief of chaplains. I said, hey, chief, we need to integrate this into the Menninger training. And then eventually we moved away from the PowerPoint and information and education into training and training of skills. And so we were doing that, and only the Army was doing that. And eventually that became a standard for chaplains in Department of Defense. So Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force. It became the standard, and everybody was trained in assist when they came on active duty as a chaplain. So the sad thing is that a lot of seminaries where you're training, in graduate school to become a minister, there's usually only one class in counseling, and they never train you to the skill level that you would get with our 2-day assist course. And so the rest is history. The Army really embraced LivingWorks Assist, and they've done our shorter courses, our 4-hour Safe Talk, and now we got this 90-minute LivingWorks Start as well.
Yeah, and I love the START program. I also love the Assist. We'll talk about that a little bit actually here. For me, I fell in love with the programs of LivingWorks when I was told about them in 2019 by an organization in central Louisiana called Save Sinla, Save Central Louisiana. So they told me about LivingWorks. I was immediately like, oh my God, I think this is amazing. I immediately felt and saw the benefits that the programs that you guys had were actually making impacts. I could see that before I even took a course. It took me some time until I was actually able to take the course, though. And I'm thankful that all the chaplains across the military are required to do this course now, because I was very fortunate to have a Navy chaplain, Lieutenant Aaron Russo, down in San Antonio, get me the assist course after doing a command-wide presentation for the command about suicide prevention and how to have the talk about suicide. At that point, I had never taken an assist course. I'd never done the START. The START wasn't even I think it was still being developed, to be honest. So there was these things that weren't there, but I already had the experience. And after the presentation, the lieutenant comes up to me and he's like, hey, we have an assist course coming up here in about a week and a half. If you're interested in hanging out, we'll get you in the course. I immediately said yes. I was on a bike journey. I had nothing holding me back, in a sense. And this was something that I really thought I could take and add to my toolbox. And I'm really glad I got to do it, because it did. And and since then, I've been very fortunate that a couple weeks later, I became affiliated with you guys at LivingWorks, with my own organization, the One Pedal at a Time movement. It was right after that the whole pandemic started and START came out. So for me, to see these courses before I took them and then actually getting to take these courses, I'm already seeing such the impact. Did you have similar ideas when you first took this course or were first told about it, about the impact it could make for military and beyond?
Well, absolutely. One of the challenges for anybody who really wants to be prepared to do a suicide intervention is, how do you overcome your hesitation to ask and use the S word?
Yes.
And then if somebody says, yes, I've been thinking about suicide, then what do you do? A lot of the times people begin to think about themselves. So when I was first introduced to assist and saw my confidence grow, and how I understood where that conversation was, in terms of, you've got to listen to why a person has come to the point of thinking of suicide. I think a lot of other programs want to try to convince. They teach you to try to convince a person right away. And so the way we teach it is you have to listen very carefully to the reasons that a person wants to die. And then as you're listening, the reasons for wanting to live will emerge. We call that a turning point. But it's a nuanced understanding, and then we talk about it, and then we practice it. So it's about confidence and knowing what to do when somebody says yes, and then even at that point, how to listen well and to work together. You know, we want to help people to keep safe for now. So safe for now is about 24 to 72 hours where they can begin to slow down a little bit, talk to some other people, and make choices. They have a choice to stay alive. And generally, that 24, that 5 minutes to 24 hours to 72 hours to talk with people, that's life-saving. Absolutely. And you really can't do that with a PowerPoint presentation. You have to step into it to develop that confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that, thankfully I had some experience, unfortunately, because of hands-on experiences for assist. But when I got to take the assist course, I definitely learned a lot more about how to handle certain things. But I noticed a lot of people that didn't have any experience in my class, to be able to ask that question, are you thinking of suicide, was very, very difficult the first day. By the second day, when we were doing the actual hands-on experiencing with the other students and everything, is when it became more comfortable for people, I think, because we had to put ourselves in the situation as if we were the person. So I think that them being put into that suicidal state of mind, even though it was acting, really got them comfortable with it. So I think that it's a huge, amazing course for people to take. But with everything going on with the pandemic, and hopefully the things will kind of level out for everybody out there. But that's why I love the START program, is because it's an online program. It does the starting aspects and does everything related to assist, but it's just the starting aspect of it. It's going into detail just enough where you get your feet wet, but you're not diving headfirst into it.
Well, right. And it's we believe in different levels of training for different roles. So assist is standard for crisis line workers. Well, does everybody need to be trained to the level of a crisis line worker? Not necessarily. But if we just had many, many more people with training so that they were alert to the possibility of suicide, we'd save a lot more lives.
Absolutely.
And so start 90 minutes online. You actually use your microphone on your phone, tablet, or computer to record your voice. You interact using texting. You interact, with a video, but you are looking for certain things and you're listening for certain things, and you get to practice those. And then after you go through the initial training, which is about an hour, then you still have to practice on a couple more scenarios. Yeah. So LivingWorks START is fundamental level of suicide safety. It's like CPR. You don't need to be a thoracic heart surgeon. You just need to know how many breaths and chest compressions. So our intermediate course is called LivingWorks Safe Talk. And Safe Talk takes you one step further than START. It really helps you to use all of your tools, and one of them is trust your intuition. Be curious, be nosy. And if someone's telling you that suicide might be involved, how to get involved and how to ask and tell a person what you're seeing, ask, and help them to keep safe. And even in LivingWorks Safe Talk, which is only 3 hours long, three and a half, you still will practice. You mentioned sometimes people don't even want to use the suicide word. Well, Safe Talk is our shortest face-to-face training. And how we encourage people is we get them to think about how they would use the word suicide, but they first begin just thinking about it in their mind. But then later on, you ask them to ask you as the instructor that question. And Dan, what you said a moment ago, It's just really tough, even for people. They're in training, but they're in front of a whole lot of people for them to ask you, Glenn, are you thinking of suicide? And so each step of the way, we're concerned about safety, not making it too hard, but we are pushing with that gentle challenge. Because if it's a challenge in the training, you'll be up to the challenge when it's reality.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with that. And I think it's for everybody out there listening, you guys, I'll have start.opat movement, which is the START program, in the comments. So people are interested to take that course, they can get on that. But, Glenn, what I really want to know is when you got to take the course and help develop it for the Army and then ultimately for the DOD in general, was that what led you to, after retiring with the military, to be like, I want to be part of this organization and join LivingWorks?
Well, that's a really good question, Dan. And, a lot of the times when you retire from the military, as I did after 30 years, I went into a setting that was very, very different. I was a full-time seminary professor. And I love my seminary. In fact, I'm still an adjunct seminary professor. But I really missed, as I mentioned before, interacting with different kinds of people, different settings. And I found that the seminary setting, I love my seminary students. I love the faculty. I love the church where I'm at. But I wanted to interact more with the outside, the doors of the church and the seminary. And so when I heard that this opportunity was opening up to work with LivingWorks, well, I thought, wow, that's for me. And I joined their team, and I've been there ever since. So it was about wanting to interact more and provide this very unique skill set to people in our communities.
Well, I'm really thankful that you are part of the team and that we're having to be able to have this conversation. But hey, Glenn, let's take a quick break, and then after the break, we'll dive into more of LivingWorks.
Sounds good.
Hey guys, Alex Casedo here, aka Bum on Two Wheels, and an ambassador for the One Pedal at a Time movement. I'm super excited to have joined the group and to share their message while I'm on my own journey. I recently completed the LivingWorks START training course, which gives you techniques on how to identify somebody struggling with thoughts of suicide, how to talk to them about it, and also provides resources to help them. It's a super great course that's easy to go through, interactive, not boring, and did I mention educational, which is the #1 priority of the OPAT movement. So if you're interested in joining the movement, get started at start.opatmovement.com. I think you'll find it very informative and worth your time. Now, to the episode.
Well, we're back from that break. Glenn, something I really want to get into right away is I hear a lot of people not even understand how to pick somebody out that may be suicidal. So how does if someone might be suicidal, what behaviors are seen when somebody might be in that state of mind?
That's a great question, Dan, and that's one that probably whenever we're talking about suicide, that needs to be asked. The thing that we stress in our LivingWorks programs is we don't give a PowerPoint of the types of people, because if we did, that people would be limited because they'd only be looking for that type of people. But what we talk about is often people will consciously or unconsciously invite people to ask about suicide. They don't even realize they're doing that. And some of the invitations would fall into 4 areas: things you see, things you hear, things you sense, and things you learn. So some of the things that you might see is a person they don't care anymore about anything. Their appearance, their work performance, being on time. They're more moody. They're withdrawing. They're abusing alcohol and self-medicating, perhaps. Mm. Some of the things you might hear is just these little statements like, you don't need me around here anymore. I think it's just better if I'm not involved. That you're hearing they just want to be alone. You might also hear that, excuse me, they lack a purpose, or they want to escape, or they're a burden. That's another big one. Ah, man, life would be a lot easier if I weren't around. Also, the things you sense, you might sense there's a desperation. You might sense that they feel hopeless. You might sense that they're even numb, where they used to be excited about things, and now they're just numb. They're neither excited nor just blasé. They're blasé.
Yep.
They're flat. And then they might even you might sense that they're ashamed. A lot of times in the military, we'd always kind of have high alert for anybody that was facing some legal, actions for their behaviors. And then finally, things you learn about a person, if they've been abused, if they've just had a rejection. A lot of times, loss of a relationship, a significant relationship. Other kinds of losses, loss of their job, loss of a dream. And then maybe you might hear about previous suicide experiences. So things you see, hear, sense, and learn. We call those invitations. And so we need to be alert for the invitations and to ask if those changes are related to thoughts of suicide.
Absolutely. And from my own personal experiences, from my own 3 suicide attempts, I can say every single time I definitely either verbally said that I didn't belong anymore, or I think it was my second time I tried to give all my stuff away. And so it just, all those things that are out of the ordinary are definitely reasons for people to bring up that caution and to be willing to ask that question. Are you thinking about suicide? So definitely, pay attention to those behaviors and the actions that people have. But as you said, you can't really pick out an individual person. We're all different, but we definitely have similar invitations that we show. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I also, unfortunately, was into drugs for substance abuse and alcohol and everything else as well. So
wow, yeah,
I can relate to that, and I think that's why I did so well before I went to the assist course, because I just related to how I went through those things when I was doing my interventions, and so yeah, I get that, and it's definitely important for people out there to be aware of those situations that could be literally right next to us.
Right. Be alert to the possibility of suicide. Right?
Yes. But some people may look at this, some of those things that we brought up, and a statement someone might make is, oh, somebody, that person's just being dramatic. What is your response to such a statement?
Well, I would probably say, well, why do you think they're being dramatic? What might they be trying to say in their behaviors or in this dramatic kind of statement that they've just made? Don't you think that there's a reason why they might be acting that way? Let's get under that. It's very interesting. Same with anger. Same with impulsivity. A lot of the times, what's underneath those kinds of things? For guys, anger is the most accepted emotion. But if we as guys, and I think we as human beings, just say, hey, wow, that was a pretty strong reaction. What's going on underneath that? What were you thinking? What were you thinking about yourself or whoever you're reacting to? And you know what? That's a powerful thing to give the invitation for a person to talk to you about their emotions, and their reactions. Their thinking.
No, I definitely agree with that. When I was going through my actual suicide attempts, I had blinders on. I was looking for certain people to help me, but the people that were offering help weren't the people I was looking for. Something that because of my accident that I was in October, I was moody. I literally could flip a switch and go from being smiling to angry, crying, whatever it was. and I'm thankful I wasn't in that state of mind. I wasn't really even depressed. I was just in pain and trying to process everything that had just happened. But
Right.
I'm really thankful because of the support that I have through my journey and the communication that I've brought up and told people and said, hey, be aware of these things like we're talking about now. Is I actually had people reach out to me and be like, hey, Dan, are you okay? Are you gonna be okay through this? Maybe they didn't ask me directly about suicide, because I usually am proactive and be like, suicide's not on my mind. Don't worry, it's not there this time. And but
Wow.
the fact that they were willing to reach out because they saw my emotions switch overnight, obviously. But that's a step that I was looking for, and I'm thankful that those people reached out, even though I was very hostile about them reaching out for that. Like, do you know what I'm doing for this journey? There's no reason why I would go back to that ever again. But I'm thankful that they were concerned enough to at least reach out. So,
Right.
you know, for anybody, regardless if you think it's dramatic or for attention, there's a reason for it. So definitely make sure you be part of their support. Be there for them. Find out the real reasons, even if it's not for suicide. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Whatever it is, be part of that. Be part of that process.
Right. Absolutely. I love to talk about the concept of natural helpers. We've become so therapeutic these days. And you know that everybody's got to go to a professional. Well, in many cases, that's the case. I would not want to say don't go to professionals. But as someone who's trained as a marriage and family therapist, I've done all the training. A lot of times, any professional will find out who are the powerful people in your life that you need to talk to. And what kind of wisdom would they give to you if you were talking to them? So we're talking about natural helpers. I think that's really cool how somebody reached out to you. You know, they knew you were injured. Are you going to be okay? We need to cultivate that natural response of compassion and caring more readily. And I think it gets sharpened when we are trained in suicide intervention skills.
Yeah,
That's what I think is so good about our family of programs, in that it just helps you to be a better listener. It helps you to be a better natural helper. You don't need to be a professional to help people.
No, you don't. And that's it's definitely. And I'm glad you brought up the going to seek professional help. Again, I reference me because I have my own knowledge from my own experiences. Is when I would reach out to somebody, they'd be like, you know, I need help. I need someone to help me, because, you know, when I finally admitted that I was suicidal, they're like, you should go see a therapist or a counselor. And it kind of shut me off, to be honest, because one, they just kind of pushed me. I felt that the feeling I felt was that they pushed me aside and said, go get real help. I'm not here to help you. Mm-hmm. But, you know, for anybody that comes and reaches out to somebody, be willing to guide them to get the help. You know, you don't have to be their therapist. You don't have to get them through that situation, but being part of it to get them to the step of being like, hey, you know, maybe I'm not the right person to talk to about this, but let me help you get to that point. You know, that I think if I had a friend that was educated on how to handle a situation properly and they did that for me, I wouldn't have gone through multiple suicide attempts. So I think that's important for people to hear is be involved in the process. Again, be involved. Even if it's just being there and say, hey, here's a number that you can call. I'll be right here with you while you call them. So
Right.
But, you know,
Good point.
Glenn, you know, I really want to talk about LivingWorks and the programs that they have in place. But before we get into the programs, what is the primary mission of the organization?
Oh, well, our vision is a world safe from suicide. And our primary focus is that suicide is everyone's business. You know, we really believe that anyone can be trained, just like CPR, to save someone that's having a heart attack. Well, to be trained to be able to respond if somebody is so desperate, so hopeless that they're thinking of suicide. Those are really focal points of the company. And, you know, we're wanting to train professionals, people in common helping roles, but just friends and human beings, like you said, and these kinds of human interaction and suicide safer skills, safety from suicide skills.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think when I was first told the phrase suicide safer communities, I was like, what does that mean? And being in the assist course and taking START and everything else now, and just being active with LivingWorks, it really means exactly what it says. We're trying to make the community safer, and the only way we do that is by becoming a community.
Right. Absolutely.
So, you guys have quite a few programs that are active right now. And you just came out with a new program more recently, but what are the programs that are currently available to people out there that if they were to come to LivingWorks website, livingworks.net, what courses are available right now?
Sure. Well, we have a family of intervention courses, and they're very fundamental. We've already talked about a couple of them. LivingWorks START is fundamental suicide intervention skills. It really teaches you how to tell a person what you're observing, ask about them, talk about the seriousness of these thoughts of suicide and connect them. So it's about being a suicide intervention connector. Then we have the 3.5 hour safe talk. And that gets more into I'd say it's kind of like, basic first aid. So if you've just got CPR, which is compressions and breathing, the safe aid is, or the first aid is, clear the airway, stop the bleeding, and treat for shock. So safe talk gives you the next level of skills. And helps the learners not to miss, dismiss, or avoid suicide. And then assist, as we've already talked about as well, it's the standard for crisis line workers. So people trained in START or Safe Talk or any other fundamental training can bring someone to an assist trained person for a full intervention and the ability to create a very detailed keep safe plan. Whereas START doesn't get into safety planning, and neither does Safe Talk. They're going to refer to others who can do a more comprehensive suicide intervention. Assist does that. Then we have another program that is very unique, and that's called Suicide to Hope. So this program teaches you how to talk to somebody after they're safe, and really talks about recovery and growth after the suicide experience. We do know that there are people, and you're an example, that were saved from suicide after serious suicide thoughts or an attempt. But those thoughts and an attempt came back. So Suicide to Hope really teaches skills to talk to somebody, and again, natural helpers. We're talking coaches, or it is really oriented around a therapist or a mental health provider, but I still believe like a coach, a pastor, a priest, a teacher, a school counselor.
Yeah, I think that 100% with what you're just saying. I think that if you're a public servant of any type, of any branch, I think that it's very important courses to take. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So Suicide to Hope really is, if those thoughts come back, what will you do? What did you learn from that experience that you can put into practice again if that comes back? And then the one I'm really excited about, just because I'm a chaplain and I'm ordained clergy, is LivingWorks Faith. And that's all online. It's not intervention, but it's to educate our faith leaders in the things they do to prevent and get people to seek help. And then it uses START for intervention, and then how to support life for those that have experienced suicide behaviors. So it talks about funerals and memorials and suicide grief for the people, in their congregations or ministries. And it also talks about long-term care. So that's the last of the programs. So those are all of our programs.
Hey, and that's a lot. And, I'm really excited. I'm not a spiritual leader per se, but I'm really excited to be able to try to take this faith program that you have, one for my own toolbox to be able to add it onto. But also, I speak to a lot of faith communities, and in the past, I used to do a lot of speeches at churches and various places. So I'm hoping to be able to gain that knowledge to share that with, our spiritual leaders so that they become more involved in suicide safer communities within their own community.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. The church and faith community is huge in our society. You don't hear a lot about it, but there was some research that said that really 48 to 49% of the U.S. population at least worships one time a month. So that would be 150 million people plus. Mm-hmm. So even if those numbers, and that's research from like around 10 years ago, but even if you cut that into a third, still about 100 million people might go to a worship in some kind of setting monthly. Mm-hmm. So now we'll do the numbers that there's about 600,000 clergy of one type or the other. Many are involved after the fact, after there's been a suicide death and a memorial or funeral. And many could have the influence of encouraging people to seek help if they are desperate, if they are hopeless, if thoughts of suicide are present. Because, I'm running a course right now that is using LivingWorks Faith, and just about every one of the students, our learners, have experienced suicide in their congregation. So faith leaders and ministers, pastors, priests need to be prepared and be advocates for more suicide alertness.
Absolutely. And I'm proud to be an advocate for that. Something that I definitely want to shout out to everybody that's listening. If you are a person of faith, a person of religion, definitely, we're not saying that you have to go take this faith program personally. We recommend the start for sure. But, bring this information to your leaders, your spiritual leaders. Tell them about this program so that they can become more educated to help your communities out even further. That's the goal. Is we want to make suicide safer communities. If that's the community of your church, if that's the community of your work, there's always a place for education and training. So take advantage of it when you can. And for START, you guys can do that through start.opatmovement.com. And we'll help you out. If you can't get the course, say you can't afford it, reach out to me at OPAT Movement. I'm going to take that back. OPAATM@gmail.com with your information, first name, last name, and we'll hook you up with a free course as well. So if you can't afford it, come reach out to us. We'll get you the course. We want people educated. We want to make suicide safer communities.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah, that's something that I'm honored to be able to do through my organization. We're starting up. We're hitting our second year now, and trying to just make a difference. And I'm thankful that you guys exist, LivingWorks, to be able to provide these education trainings so that I can help further that education, and so I'm thankful for that. But for everybody else out there right now, what else can individuals do to help this movement?
I think advocate they themselves getting some training, and also being alert to the fact that, at any given time, 1 in 20 people in the United States might be thinking of suicide. So how can you really keep them safe from the impact of suicide? Suicide affects 135 people on average. And of that 135, about 40% would call themselves close or very close. So suicide has a powerful ripple effect. And especially if those people are, struggling themselves, now if they know somebody, that could even, and especially in this time of COVID, a lot of people are desperate. A lot of the people are cut off. So that would be important. Be an advocate for training, get training yourself, but also let's practice being human. I live in a city right now. And, when I retired from the military, I came into a city. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And, when I lived in smaller towns, you walk by somebody and you say hello, or you just nod at them or something. Boy, in the city, it's real easy to walk by people and just think they're like a tree or a pole or something like that. You yourself will be a more joyful person if you just will greet people and be human. And then to the people in your circles, pay attention,
Yes.
And ask how people are doing, just like people did with you, Dan. I think we're on a campaign to try to sharpen our human being skills. And I think suicide prevention does a good job at that. We might ask somebody, "You're thinking about suicide?" No, I'm not. But thanks for asking. You're not going to plant the seed. But what you're really doing is you're practicing being a human being and being a caring human being. That's what we need.
That's
for everyone.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that so much, Glenn. I think that we definitely need more people involved in listening and just involved, really. So I'm excited for people to get involved, to get them educated, whether that be through START, Assist, Faith, whatever program that is. There's a place for everybody at a different level. You don't have to be the go-to expert, but what I love about all these programs is, at least the ones I've taken so far, you get references as well. So you're not a professional after you take the course and you know all the research information or the numbers to call or who to reach out to. Like, for instance, the START program. You take the START program, after you're done with it, you can go back into the program and get the resource information for people to actually help people, to who to call, how to get them in the right direction. So you're not into this by yourself. It's still,
right.
You're in it with a team. You're in it through a group. The more people that you get involved with, if you do in-person training, you're not going to do this course by yourself. You're going to do it with probably a dozen other people.
Right.
So you're going to potentially have a dozen people that you can be like, "Hey, man, I'm going through this with somebody. What do you recommend?" "Oh, dude, this is what I did with this person." So it becomes a network. So become part of the network, join the team. And I'm excited for it. I'm thankful that I'm part of it. And every day that I have the opportunity, I share it with people. So Glenn, I'm thankful that we had this opportunity for sure.
Well, Dan, thanks for your advocacy. Thanks for your authenticity in telling your story. And I pray for your impact in these podcasts and for all the people you've touched when you were on the road. I'm also prayerful for your physical therapy and healing. So you've taken what life has given you, and with a purpose, you've sharpened it. So all the best to you and your nonprofit. It's a fabulous thing. So thanks for the opportunity to be on the show.
Not a problem. Before we get going, though, one last thing, a couple of things. The first thing is, what's the future look like for LivingWorks? Like, do you guys have anything planned for the future with hopefully the pandemic coming potentially at some point to an end?
Well, I think, a lot of our face-to-face trainings have been shut down. But LivingWorks Start has just exploded. We have really had a lot of uptake. My hope is we can move from online to real face-to-face training. That's in the future. And for me personally, I'd love to see hundreds, thousands more of churches, faith communities, ministry leaders trained, also doing online and face-to-face training. So that's a bright future. And ultimately, I'd love to see the numbers of suicides decline, that it would become part, just like when we talked about drunk driving and made efforts to do that. That's the future, I think, when everyone works together. So that's our hope.
That's the huge hope for all of us, and I couldn't agree with that any more than you already said. So I'm thankful for it. Glenn, last thing is, the last closing remarks. You have the opportunity to speak directly to listeners. What do you got to say to them?
Well, in a nutshell, I believe that God is sovereign over all things. And no matter what your circumstances are, I think, as I look at you, Dan, we're on a Zoom right now. It just is a voice on a podcast. But I see a man that he told me his story. He's been through a lot of difficult things. But it's sometimes through that crucible of suffering that we emerge a different person. I believe that there is traumatic growth, even when we've gone through difficult traumas in life. I think that's spiritual. The stories and narratives of the scriptures talk a lot about that. So wherever you are, practicing human being skills, being real and authentic, caring, but also if you're in that dark place right now, reach out, don't isolate, and realize that there's going to be growth through a difficult time.
Glenn, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you so much, and God bless.
Feeling is mutual. God bless you, and thanks, Dan.
What a great conversation. It was such an honor to share this time with Glenn, to have such a successful military career, then to move to another and continue to excel by being part of the change for suicide prevention. That's powerful stuff. He is truly part of a team making a difference at LivingWorks. I hope that I can continue to provide even a fraction of the service he has, and I look forward to being able to add to my toolbox for suicide training with the LivingWorks Faith Program. A huge thank you to the organization and Glenn for giving me the opportunity to take the course. We all can, and I personally think we all should, play a role when it comes to preventing suicide. We all have to start somewhere, and I recommend going to start.opatmovement.com to get started. If suicide hasn't affected your life, I am thankful for that. But it can easily and drastically change in a very sad moment. Don't wait till it's already too late. Join the movement today to make suicide safe for communities. Next week, we look into the consequences of our habits with JT Frank. Let's create better habits. Replace controlling addictions with proactive addictions. For me, podcasting has temporarily replaced cycling, which replaced some of my worst habits. What habits do you have that you want to change? Think about it. And join us next week with another Movement Monday episode. Have a great rest of your day. Till next time. Copyright Heart of Volunteer 2021.